reading that little line, I will be arrested for not taking a fucking vaccine. This is not a fucking joke anymore. This is fucking dead serious. I am fucking dead serious. These people don't know who the fuck they're actually playing with. Yeah, in a group they might come and fucking intimidate me and whatnot, but fuck, they do not understand what the fuck just one person like myself is capable of. They do not fucking understand. No fucking vaccine or mRNA will ever flow through my fucking ball blood. Never! I will fucking die fucking fighting for my forefathers and my fucking lineage. Fuck these motherfuckers.
All right. That is peaking, and we seem incredibly dark for some reason. Why is that? Just me? Wait one. Well, you know, I suppose I've got to turn the lights on. I didn't realise the camera was looking so dark. I apologise. Bear with me 1 second, folks. Right then. That didn't help much, did it? I haven't messed with the camera settings. Oh, strange. I refuse to get one of those vanity lights. Maybe I need like a white screen on Google. Like everything's in dark mode. Oh, it's all dark. Darkness be upon us. And maybe we have the Harbinger, what the doc has been talking about for years. And I guess it's like when you're in a sort of research environment, and I get it that we're a less than orthodox one at the moment. We're moving more into an orthodox space, but you generate hypotheses. You try to work towards what you think is what data is telling you, what you think your knowledge base is telling you, and what I've been concerned about, of course, is the release of amyloids, weaponized amyloids, such that there's a fallout that maybe even if it was secondary to their strategic aims, which was more sort of incapacitation and fuck with you, as World War Zog has been in full flow, and that's something to talk about. Because I've been traveling, it's why I haven't streamed the last couple of days. I was in Tokyo at the clinic, Edogawa Clinic, where we're doing the stem cell treatments and setting up or working on the apheresis. So basically, we're ready to receive patients, and it's, you'd like more data, and I would like the animal studies to have all been done, etc. But sometimes serendipity steps in, and you get a good strong signal from where you weren't expecting it, and it's incumbent upon you in that research environment to follow those leads. And so, in the last week or two, I've been streaming about the changes that we've been able to induce in highly amyloid loaded blood, or high amyloid load blood. And although this was a serendipitous case walking through, there is now potentially another one. And the reason, one of the technical issues I had was I didn't have a PowerPoint available, like an old one that I use, which just has much of the slides that I would want to talk about in this particular topic domain, because what we're going to talk about has this overlap with Daphne monkey. And for those who are not on your not familiar with the lore or the history of the channel or the history of my research, Daphne monkey was a spontaneous onset, early spontaneous onset Parkinsonian-like syndrome in a subspecies of Japanese macaque. And there's been, the speciality in which I worked were, the dream was to have an animal like this so you could test the premises, the constructs of your systems and hypotheses and models, etc., and hopefully do some the interventions, maybe. But Daphne monkey was pre-COVID, and Daphne monkey was, well, why do I bring Daphne monkey up? Well, because on my visit to Edogawa this week, as we were having discussions over lunch, I've got PowerPoints open, and we're talking about how to sort of steer the animal research right now. So there's things that I want to do, I've been unable to do because the facilities in the lab that we have are, although we have anesthesia, it is just not sufficient anesthesia for stereotaxic surgery. It's too shallow, and the process of being mounted into a stereotaxic frame for any animal, and including humans, a lot of effort goes into refinement of stereotax frames to make them more comfortable for surgeries. But in this instance, we're dealing with the version, the beta version of stereotax frames for rodents, and so I've sort of I put off dealing with intracranial experimentation to figure out what Spike is doing in the brain, and can we make intervention more importantly. I think that the studies are out. Just if you get Spike in the brain, it's going to lead to all manner of cascades and pathologies, and I don't think there's anything novel in that. But the animal studies in this instance may have been further bumped down the list because of providence again, which is, as we were talking about patients and just what we should be doing with respect to making sure as many people get access to the aphoretic and stem cell approach. We, the clinician, Dr. Kato Shojuro, basically said, "Oh," this was after I'd sort of reminisced about Daphne monkey, and he's like, "Oh, I have a patient. Rumble's unbearable. Yeah, fuck Rumble. Sorry, WTYL or YouTube. I don't know why it's stopping and starting. And just as a streaming interface right now, Restream has just lifted a burden off my shoulders that I'm not going back to how I would have to set up streams before. And if Rumble is fucking dead, then it's fucking useless. As to me, because it's too finicky otherwise to be wanting to stream. I need to be able to just hit go button, put a title in, and if Rumble right now is messing up, YouTube, WTYL are your places to go. Twitter as well is streaming and has no problems. So Peter Thiel engine faggotry bullshit. Yeah, I get it. Anyway, back to this Harbinger. So Shojuro says to me, "Oh, there's a patient coming in, 38, 39, okay, one of the two, is coming in this week. And, and she's coming in because they suspect multi-system atrophy. And it is, in this instance, appears to be linked to vaccination. And, in my mind, the blood pathology is similar across whether it's virus or vaccine. It just seems to be luck of the draw. And we potentially have, in the space of a few weeks, gone from bashing our heads against the wall with respect to translating, like the stem cells needed they needed a better signal, modulatory signal to go, or combination to the therapy, right? I don't think one single therapy fixes all. And, there's two things that we have to think about with these amyloid cascades in the blood. One is the aggregations, and two, it's the inflammatory profiles that emerge. And so just think inflammatory cytokines. And so we've gone from, in a matter of weeks, to having a protocol in place for treatment of patients. We're already taking patients in, treating patients, and potentially we're going to see in the next week if the Harbinger, it has the same pathology in the blood. Now, I try not to be I try to be a better man. Of course I do. When my son's watching this in the future, and your father was constant. Was always aiming for the top. I often failed in that regard, but I was always trying. So, I'm always trying to be a better man, but betting man. Would I lay bets on this potentially Daphne Mark II humanoid version having the same pathology that we're detecting. And I'm going to say probably, likely. Can I put odds on it? Difficult to say. Difficult to say right now. But if we have, but the great thing is that we have this guide that was given to us in Daphne to sort of, where we can think about looking. And the thing, and one of the, as I was sort of in discussion over lunch, I was like, and I didn't know at the time, right? So we were going to extraordinary lengths, and I'll just run through this stream, just what we did with Daphne, right? The neuroscience behind it and how we tried to aggregate as much information as possible from this serendipitous model that had been given to us in the Primate Institute. And so now, yeah, as a researcher who spent a lifetime of my adult life ensconced in that field, to now potentially beginning to see the warnings, because in terms of time frame, about 5 years, I was saying, is when you will begin to see the real impact of mass exposure to these amyloids. And of course, we can switch. Let's just go to main and bing. Is that up? I don't get why it's so dark though. So devices, machines, computing, like my car is fucked as well. I get back, and so it's just going to be a stream of me not kvetching, because there's some really exciting stuff, but there's this element of frustration as well, which is the systems around me. I'm always going, right, it's a constant battle to just to stay on top, so that you can do anything approximating something reproducible, something that you can show in an understandable format for other people. And and so this is just, so I have a sample that I picked up in Tokyo sitting in my scope right now, and I go to use my car. I got back from Tokyo. I sort of crashed out, had a shower, crashed out. I wake up about 1 to 2. I think to myself, I'll do the quick look at the slides, and now I can stream. I can stream then, right? And more optimal time for other people. And yeah, now my car is just making this horrible, just sounds like a bearing has gone on the front end of the car, the engine in this instance, not the, well, I don't know, it's like 4-wheel drive, so it could be anywhere along what is a complex Japanese all-wheel drive system. And I'm like, I was just like, fuck, I'm not, to more expense, more time lost, and and then to set up a stream today, like I said, I didn't have the PowerPoint I want. I should be able to hop between my computers no matter what they are, and I'm glaring at that tax evader of mine, because that should just be the most, like the basics of sort of maintenance in the lab, like that. I pay not to have to worry about can I connect to archival folders, etc., etc., and none of it is working as it should be working. So I have to take my car with the mechanical grinding sound as I was preparing the stream earlier to go back to the house to use the old computer where I would stream from before, and I'm trying to it's been on for weeks without generally me using it. And it's like it wants to do a massive update. It's slow, it's just getting ancient as fuck, and I just trying to get this PowerPoint for this stream. And then I get here, I click the stream button, and then obviously there was no sound. That required rebooting, and you know, why do these things go wrong in the way they are? And they're just the challenges, right? The challenges, or just it's just resistance, right, that life gives you as you attempt to engage with meat space. And can an electrical system pulse the brain, causing breaks to brain cognition without us realizing? Nah. Sorry, you would need highly specialized conditions to be able to do that. And even then, it's like in terms of. So let me. The great example is something called RTMS, which stands for repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation, and this is a therapy that's emerged where they'll claim that they can treat depression and all manner of sort of neuropsychiatric disorders, but there's no way to blind the participant of the effect of the mag stim that you give them. And so I always say, if you take a depressed person and you put them in you say you're going to get the best of the best treatment, it's the bleeding edge, and you're one of our special patients, etc., and you bring them in and they get all fussed around by researchers, doctors, nurses, etc., and they have a pulse whacked into the brain where you can sense that pulse. And the way that they'll do it is they'll aim it over motor cortex first, and they'll find a threshold in which your fingers will sort of flick, right? Or you'll get a muscle contraction, and usually they're sort of looking around this area. And then they just wind it down, and they say we'll do 80% of threshold, but the machine is still incredibly loud, and yeah, you can't blind the patient in this instance. So I think you can beam into someone's head, interrupt consciousness like you've jacked them into the Matrix, and no, you can get something like an absence seizure, maybe, but they're very, very standout in their presentation. So I'm not. I don't think that's what you're talking about. So could hypothetically do anything to brain to make them feeling and tell them it's helping them, or doing neuroplasticity. It's probably doing some neuroplasticity, but is it any better than the therapies that we have at the moment? It might do something, it might not, I think. But again, I've worked so much with brain stimulating technologies that the impact that you have to have, and they've done the testing for stimulating probes implanted into areas that they think are associated with depression. So like particularly sort of along the frontal pole into anterior cingulate and these areas have been tried significantly. We can just ask chat. Where did it go? When were phase 2, right? Phase 2 studies for DBS commenced and stopped in the USA. Give details of clinical results. And you know, if you want to, I've actually just been having to navigate NIH grant software interfaces again after a long time. But I mean, you can go and find these studies, but now just with everything's easy with it's, you know, if just as a fucking souped up search engine, ChatGPT. Let's see what it says. No, I don't want ChatGPT 5. Fuck it. Hang on. It's Broden trials. Yes, but skip. Right, ChatGPT 5 does blow chunks, but if I ask the same thing, it's giving it to me. So treatment-resistant depression. So the Broaden trials. So this study, subclosal singular white matter area 25, began enrollment in the US on 10th of April 2008. The trial was terminated early in November 2012 after an interim futility analysis indicated a lack of likely efficacy. Officially, many reports say the sponsor, St. Jude Medical, later acquired by Abbott Laboratories, halted the study when they announced the futility decision. This was a randomized, sham-controlled, double-blind implant trial in patients with severe treatment depression. The target was subclosal singular white matter region, also called Brodmann Area 25. The plan was for implantation in all, then randomization to active versus sham stimulation for 6 months, then open-label follow-up. At 6 months double-blind phase, the pre-specified futility boundary was crossed because the difference between active and sham was not statistically significant. The expected response rate in active stimulation versus sham was not achieved. The formal publication, Subcallosal Singular Deep Brain Stimulation for Treatment-Resistant Depression, concluded this study confirmed the safety and feasibility of subcallosal singular DBS, but did not show statistically significant antidepressant efficacy in a 6-month double-blind sham-controlled trial. Commentary noted that nearly half of implanted patients responded at 24 months in open-label follow-up, though this was uncontrolled, as I was saying, not randomized. More broadly, review summarized that DBS in TRD shows average response rates of 60%, but wide variability in uncontrolled settings. The control data remain weak. Thus, in the US, the study was terminated, blah-de-blah-de-blah. There was other studies, right? So there is a phase 2 adaptive DBS trial for intractable OCD in the US, which is listed as phase 2, based off a lot of my work, I will add. Yet I get none of the, I don't get any of that filthy lucre. This is all going into human stuff now. The animal, like, you know, what are you gonna squeeze out of a monkey with respect to putting in DBS probes? Not much more after what I did. I mean, I could always think of things to do, but it would be iterative findings rather than massive breakthrough findings. So the Broaden trial was halted early because of the interim futility analysis, as we just said. Some reasons discussed. Yeah, we've already done that. Key take home. Clinical results. Safety feasibility confirmed. However, sham control studies show no effect. The stoppage slowed down the momentum for psychiatric DBS in the US, probably a blessing in disguise, and highlighted the challenges of moving from movement disorder success into psychiatric disorders. Now, the reason OCD might work is that there's a degree of motoric component to the disorder that's not necessarily always through motor behaviors like compulsive washing, checking behaviors, or hair pulling, trichotillomania, things like that. But I've shown you can stop motivated behaviors through using and stimulating nucleus accumbens, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but there's probably more preclinical basis for that than trying to do depression, I would say. And pity the depressives who got enrolled in that trial, because now they're probably stuck with probes in their head and hardware under in their body, and it's a risk to take it out. It's just as much of a risk it's probably more of a risk to take it out than to just let it be. And once it's in, and the body is sort of encapsulated and adapted to all that hardware. So like I say, people think that there's this, I don't know, like the 5G beams are just going to triangulate on your head and change your moment to moment state. And I'm telling you, even with electrodes right in the most sensitive of areas, it can be difficult to get effects. So no, I don't buy the they can just change your brain state from afar. Now, with stimulating probes in, there are other factors, of course. I speak about those already. Who needs monkeys when there are millions at the ready? Well, to a degree, if there was a good depression model in primates, it might have prevented however many patients. Were implanted. Let's see. With 10 to 20 monkeys, 90 patients, we might have saved 90 people, 90 depressive people having their skulls cracked open and a DBS probe slid in there. And again, just trying to do it where they were, just where I don't like it. You have to go deeper where the network sort of contracted down to smaller, they pass through smaller nuclei, and they're better nodes for making these interventions. But so 90 people. And how many? I'm just interested if they remove the hardware. routinely removed. Okay. So, yeah, you just get left with track marks in the brain, a big, long, linear gliosis. Likely just to make your depression a whole bunch worse, right? You literally have a 6-inch long, not 6-inch, might be depending on the sort of angle they came in at, I suppose, but yeah, 4 to 6 inch long. And it's just what's the width of I would say like 1.5 to 2 millimeters. In what was the diameter of the probe used in the trials? One and a half. There you go. Yeah. So what about the shank of the probe? What was that diameter? Tire electrode lead. Yeah, so it's not so, but depending on how you make the probe, of course, it can be thicker than the measurement stated here, and it'll be, if they have separate contacts on either side of the electrode or multi-contact array, so it can be bigger than 1.5 millimeters for sure. Just a straight line into the brain. And, again, there are times for it. Parkinson's, I think it is the gold standard now, but you trying to do that for neuropsychiatric disorders in an age where neuroses and all manner of when I was a lad, you just had to suck it up, get on with it. Sort of coddled and amplified when perhaps a good talking to or a clip round the ear would have been enough to help those people not open themselves to exploratory surgeries like that. So in Japan, psychiatric stimulation and surgeries are banned. Just let's see how good it is with. Tell me why psychiatric surgeries are banned in Japan. Just because of this one lunatic. He just went bananas with the pick for lobotomies. Historical, legal, ethical, and professional regions. Lobotomy began in Japan in the 30s and peaked after World War II. Let's see. By the 1950s, Japan saw a significant number of lobotomies performed, primarily for schizophrenia, mood disorder, and violent behavior. The death of a patient in 1975 and growing awareness of severe side effects, personality flattening, emotional blunting. Well, haven't they heard of doom scrolling? Yeah, so 1975 was reaffirmed in 78, but let's see if we can find the case. It's not giving the case, but yeah. So in 2005 and 10, a group of Japanese psychiatrists and neurosurgeons attempted to launch a pilot for DBS in major depression, but no go. And there was a neurosurgeon who was associated with many negative outcomes. What was his name? Let's just specify it. Sadate Hirose, 1918 to 2007. So he was riding high on the hog. What's not Unit 8200? What's the Japanese what's the Japanese unit 731? Was that it? Like he would have probably been ensconced in something like that. Okay, so it's described in a 2017 review as having performed many lobotomies, orbito-ventromedial undercutting procedures, beginning in 1947. According to the same review, until 1957, he performed 400 operations using many variations of lobotomy. Of these procedures, 290 were for schizophrenia, others were for depression, obsessive neuroses, epilepsy, psychopathic behavior, and so on. Look, man, I think there could still be a place for targeted lobotomies in some. Just, it's not a lifestyle thing. It should be like, oh, you're a danger to society. You might be a low impulse control nigger on a bus. Was it a bus? Just might want to take out a dagger to young petite blonde war refugees. I'd lobotomize that type of chimp. No problem. Give me the tools. Jack Cruz says blue light fucks your brain. He says lots of stupid shit. But let's see. The review notes that his results included some discharge to home, but many remained hospitalized. Some had long-term death, and that he acknowledged the roughness of the procedures and the attendant side effects. Yeah, just let me just grab the thing and boom. Yeah, what a time to be involved in neuroscience, I suppose. Yes. Who was the other? Expand on the other. I want to say there was a more recent one than that. Expand on the others. With focus on more recent. But, as a career move, it was a heaven with respect to access to monkeys and being essentially allowed free rein to do the type of studies that I was privileged to do, honor to do. But me trying to get grants in Japan for the type of studies which I was doing, which was basically neurosurgery approaches to neuropsychiatric disorders, and with the focus being OCD. That one didn't fly very well, and so they just let me get on with my thing, and here we are today. Work's been done, published. There's a few more publications I could do. There's stuff that I have to work on in the background to make that happen, but we'll see. Maybe in the near future. Let's see. Nakata was a Japanese surgeon who is credited as performing the first psychosurgical procedure in Japan in November 1938. His team performed about 52 procedures. Two for feeble-mindedness. Oi! You! Young Tojo over there, your math scores ain't up to scratch. You finding that grammar a bit on the tricky side? We have just the cure for you, sir. Public performance says when a person is thinking about a task such as making something or learning something, is the brain thinking with the psychology? It's a kind of tautological question that you're asking, right? So what does psychology mean? It just means it's a vague term meaning working of the mind. And I'm pretty sure that your mind is working right now as you type stuff into your PC. There are all manner of signals that I could derive from your brain. Were you allow me to crack you open like a like a tax evader cracks open cans of beer on a yeah, but that feeble mind has worked out a real treat. Yeah. Those exam scores just rocketing up. Just the dribble coming out of the mouth. Back then, the ink would have been not so stable, more water-based, right? He's just slobbering over the over the exam paper. Is brain computation a type of psychology? I would argue that it is a form of computation. But then what do we mean by computation? It seems that the idea of computation becomes ever more broad as we understand the fundamentals of math and interactions in fundamental what do I say, primal constructs, and I always think he's very eloquent speaker, and I highly recommend people watching his lectures. And his name is Wolfram Stephen Wolfram. I was going to say Wolfram Schultz, who is he's the primate physiologist who discovered the temporal reward difference algorithm in primates. I got drunk with him at Cambridge, like jolly old academic fellows that we were back in the day. But yeah, times have changed. Is this brain experiencing a self or concept of self when it's doing basic learning tasks? Well, it depends what you mean. So there are some reflexes that are learned, what you could say are subconsciously, right? Because there are complex networks, spinal reflex networks that will do the local computation so that you don't have the lag time of shuttling information up to cortical areas and requiring the feedback down. Now, you have long loop reflex axons, which go so you have the short loop reflexes, which are spinal reflexes, and then long loop reflexes, which ascend and descend after their projection. Fucking hell. Big motorbike just went by. What was I saying? Long loop reflexes, and these are signals that, again, we've been able to monitor for decades. When they were doing, literally, you could go back, I bet, and you could find the some of the earliest electrophysiological recordings in, like, when they're really starting to quantify. I want to say you can go back to 1900s. When were the first calibrated EEG? My spelling sucks today. EEG recordings obtained and isolation of long cortical reflex. Dr. McCairn is a precise historical account of the first calibrated EEG recordings and the isolation of long-loop cortical reflexes, key landmarks in electrophysiology and systems neuroscientists. Science, I should say. I'm the scientist. Part 1. First calibrated EEG recordings. They were done by Hans Berger in 1924 in Jena, Germany. However, the landmark published account came in 1929. Berger used a string galvanometer, an ink-writing oscillograph calibrated against voltage fluctuations. Signal amplitude was originally recorded in microvolts with calibration through known resistive circuits. The earliest calibration used known sine wave inputs and applied resistors to approximate cortical potentials. Let's just see about... so that's 1920. When were the very first cortical recordings made? And I would say, I would imagine as Pavlov kicked in, right, the ramifications of Pavlovian conditioning, that there was another very famous, Sherrington was the physiologist. He used to work with someone else. They would do all weird and wacky experiments back in the day. 1875 to 1877, the true pioneer, Richard Caton. Non-amplified galvanomic detection of voltage from exposed cortex via needle electrodes. There you go. So that is proto-electrophysiological recording, as I would do it. And so if you're just using a piece of stainless steel needle, you're basically just getting a low impedance recording, and you can get waveform, the oscillations and the oscillation pauses, etc., wind up, wind down, if you knew what you were doing. But back then, when you had just paper, there wasn't so much you could do, I suppose. I guess if the rhythms were really strong, you could, and you had your timing was somewhat calibrated. Out of Beck. Yeah, so it's a 100-year-old technology now. Let's see. Diane's literally said, I've met two people who had one of those early lobotomies. The woman had 2 large holes in her forehead, and the man was kidnapped as a teenager. He got off a train in London, Euston, and lobotomized. That's horrible. Cataracts is misfolding proteins. I don't know. I've heard that discussion before, and is it, or is it just the that aging of the skin, right? It's the calluses. Oh, ow! That blew out my eardrums. What was that? Discord. Oh, my phone must be connected to the. Yeah. What did scientists say about brains being aggravated by the needles, so therefore giving incorrect readings? What did they say about that? That you can get the same readings with non-invasive, except your spatial resolution is not as good, and so it's possible to, as you you step a electrode into the brain, that in front of the probe, the tissue is not damaged yet, and so you can listen to a neuron's activity firing, and you can see if it's, what we would, one of the earliest tests that you sort of learn is sort of sensory motor manipulation, and you try to, a lot of this when I first started, like even going back to sort of at the turn of this millennium, right, out of the 90s into 2000s, right, a lot of the published work in my sort of domain, electrophysiology, you would still get paper trace readouts, and the on an oscilloscope, right, you can get it to, the old, well, it still does that function, right, but you can hold the threshold and say hold the trace, so that it'll sort of aggregate relative to a reference input. And it's kind of funny as I think back to how I would try to learn from those studies relative to what is today. It's like it has come a quantum leap just to a digital processing, etc. But the in terms of, yes, if you put electrodes into the brain, there is some degree of damage, right? And but it's cost benefit analysis. Now, again, for OCD, I think I can still argue for there being grounds for making an intervention. But then often, a lot of times people who are OCD are often quite comfortable with their sort of behavioral tics. It's often when they become really malignant, and the person starts to, there's the compulsions and obsessions, right? So there are fundamental difference between the two. So compulsions are the drive to move, and if I hadn't, or my OCD was worse, like every time I would like pick up the vape, I would have to make sure that the thing was tightened, that everything was set up properly, etc. If that was just one manifestation. And the motor component of it is the compulsions. But then there are obsessive manifestations, which are the rumination of thought. So when you're thinking and you can't break the loop in your mind, then that is that becomes obsession. Well, we have ChatGPT, so give the medical definition between compulsions and obsessions. There we go. Obsessions are recurrent and persistent thoughts, urges, or images that are experienced as intrusive and unwanted, caused marked anxiety or distress. Compulsions are repetitive behaviors or mental acts that an individual feels driven to perform in response to an obsession or according to rigid rules. So, I don't know. There's a overlap, of course. That's why we say obsessive compulsive disorders, I suppose. It's in the name, right? I said a lot of questions there. I'm not getting on with the Harbinger. Well, anyway, it's just we may have this week, if I can get my car to Tokyo, I'll be able to get that blood back to the lab and under the scope within 24 hours of getting it, and that is potentially it could be a groundbreaking data point. And if the emergence of the multi-system atrophy, so what is why is there a difference between Parkinson's and multi-system atrophy, right? What's the difference, right? So multi-system atrophy is as it says, as an atrophy of the deep nuclei of the brain, those that make up the basal ganglia, but it also involves deeper autonomic centers, such that in someone who develops multi-system atrophy, although that they have Parkinsonian-like symptoms, they're there's a couple of differentiators, right? So one is, are you responsive to dopaminergic therapy? And in multi-system atrophy, you're not. And the other, what was the other one? Incontinence, right? And that is the dysautonomia, the loss of autonomic and function. And those are the markers that we use to, at a medical level, to differentiate between Parkinson's and multi-system atrophy. Potentially this week we have a case coming on board, and if it's a consequence of vaccines, which is the suspicion at the moment, and there are blood markers, then in this instance, there may be a pathway to treatment that hadn't been considered before, because this was a point I was trying to get to earlier, which was all the tech and resources, right? So I wanted to, let's see, PowerPoint. So this was presented just pre-COVID. We've really managed to sort of push the front forward, as it were, or the enemy back in this instance with, like I say, the therapeutic result that we achieved I was guiding advice in this approach. I was sort of doing the quantification of the responses, but it was the people who were driven to do the treatment, so the patient themselves in this instance, and the treating hospitals, I should say, in this instance, because we couldn't get everything done. We didn't get everything done at Edogawa. Now we can have everything done at Edogawa. That's what I was sort of working on this weekend. And, well, I'll go back. well, I don't know. I'm waiting to see when the patient is coming. The hospital was it was Saturday afternoon, and a lot of it sort of closed down for the week. Let's see. What was I doing? I wanted to do this. I'm just PowerPoint is fucking killing me lately, or today. Open. I don't care. Come on. Why is it? Why is it being so gay? Okay, now it's opening up. So long, like this was literally just before November 2017. That doesn't feel right. This was 2019. Yeah, that's got the wrong title on it. But All That Glitters Is Not Gold. That presentation was 2019. But anyway, I would do lots of broad scientific principles, and I'd speak about electric fields and tensor manifolds and yada yada, and I don't know how much of it is. Yeah, it's useful frameworks, I suppose. And these are this was published work. Some of it was published work by me. The one in the right corner is not. But these sort of box and arrow diagrams was really how we were working, right? How sort of basic. I don't know. Like you can look at any sort of manuscript about LLMs, right? And I do sort of, as they get dropped into my feed, you'll look at them, and they have schematics as to what the nodes are doing within their networks and the transformers and what have you. But it's more this that I wanted to get to, which is the but this is the degree to which we were getting this data, and still do. The fact that what's it? Not SpaceX. The other one. His Neuralink, right? The fact that they're able to treat is essentially just a compacted down version of what you're looking at on the screen there, and the signals are the same, and those signals derived from the brain are able to restore function to paraplegics. Now, Neuralink wasn't the first group to do that. Now, is their technology better? Yes, I believe so. I think the robotic surgical architecture and electrode placement, after they've done the photo analytics of looking for blood vessels, is fantastic. Really a tour de force of engineering. Whereas, I would be doing it off reference points done from surgery to within experiment, driving electrodes in such that I built out a electrophysiological map that you could lay onto a standard reference atlas and say, okay, this is the trajectory that I think we're coming at, and seeing the deep structures that I was aiming for, and why do that? Because as much as you think you're perfectly in register with the frame itself, just to the variations in the skull and the cortex in primates varies quite significantly to deep midbrain structures than a rodent brain does, right? So the you can look at a rodent brain and say there's primary motor cortex, and within plus minus a tenth of a millimeter you'll find the subcortical structures, whereas if you were just reliant on cortical structures in a primate brain, you can be off 10-20% of where you think you are. And so that was what I would do, is sort of map out these brains, and just I know that at the time when we were able to do this, which was merge MRI with CT with the probes in the brain, positioned in the brain. This was again right at the bleeding edge, but it's it's 10 years ago now, and yeah, and again I look at this, and this was published in just this right hand corner, like old VHS, old CCTV cameras. I would have to stop and start on a VHS was incredibly painful process, not like it is today. Much of my PhD was just spent doing that and trying to coordinate stopwatches across multiple behaviors. And then we get to this being able to monitor the animal's behavior. So the person who was asking about how do we know that the neuron that we're recording from at the time is acting, is not acting to the needle being placed into the brain? Well, its response is to essentially follow the task that the animal is doing, and in this case, that's me inducing a tick in the arm, and we got an enormous amount of data sort of following this protocol. But then we had Daphne, right? This Parkinsonian little monkey who she was a subspecies of, and I never remember the name of the island. Let me just check ChatGPT really quick for that one. ChatGPT, what? But then I don't have access to all my academic stuff. I'm getting more and more slowly disconnected from it through shitty network. I'm just going back to TeamViewer. Fuck it. At least I can get access to stuff. What are the subspecies? What? No, not what. What are the subspecies of Japanese macaque? And what does it say? Yeah. No, just Japan. I want Japan, please. It's giving me fucking hell. There's so many macaque subspecies. Just Japanese. Yeah, it has 2 recognized subspecies, right? So, Macaca fuscata, main islands of Japan, Honshu, Shikoku, Kyushu. Literally, there's monkeys rolling around. Not so much here. Just have to go a little bit further into the wildlands, and you'll be driving around, and they'll just be chilling in the middle of the road. So their characteristics are larger body size, males up to 12 kilos, thicker fur, grey-brown coloration, shorter tail, adapted to cold climates. Populations live as far north as Aomori and Nagano, the famous Juko-Kudani hot spring monkeys. And then there's Macaca fuscata yukui, which is what Daphne was, and restricted to Yakushima Island, south of Kyushu. Smaller body size, darker coat, shorter limbs, adapted to subtropical rainforest conditions, behaviorally more arboreal and less snow adapted than mainland populations. Genetically distinct lineage. Yukui diverged from mainland Fuscata roughly 0.3 to 500,000 years ago, likely due to isolation on Yakushima. Both subspecies exhibit complex social structures, multi-male, multi-female troops with matrilineal hierarchies. Famous behaviors, stone handling, hot spring bathing, and regional culture-like traditions unique to specific troops. But yeah, it's the Yukui subspecies that we're looking at here. And here she's very far into the disease. And when I first saw this animal, she just had the slightest tremor, and I just finished doing again another first, which was the real-time, simultaneous recording of cortical, all the nuclei of the basal ganglia, plus the contralateral cerebellum. And so this was the cerebellum is like the sort of forgotten appendage of the brain, and I was the first to look at it in MPTP or Parkinsonian monkeys in a spontaneous Parkinsonism like Daphne had, and to also look at it in tic disorders. And so I was, what drives tremor in Parkinson's? Well, the prevailing orthodoxy is that these are thalamocortical projections, and it's the drumbeat of thalamic input that drives the canonical, you see the pill rolling tremor of Parkinson's. But how much is a consequence of cerebellar input or malfunction, I suppose you could say, not input in this instance. And these were unresolved questions, and I was what I was doing was getting in there and learning all the temporal interactions and higher order interactions that you need to fully understand these brain structures and states. So at this point, she's like, if you know primates, she's got no hair left, right? So she's literally, she's degenerating, and she's showing the same neuropsychiatric abnormalities that we associate with dementia type conditions, particularly the MSAs. And Parkinson's has them as well. I mean, again, the boundaries can be blurry once you start taking magnifying glasses to these. But she had very much an OCD type presentation where she's plucked all the hair out of her arm, and I didn't mean to do that. And so, yeah, the point I was getting to was, and now it's been a circuitous route during this stream, which is, for all the technology thrown at this, that we were primed, ready and waiting to look at all these brain regions and we went to, like, the big scar you can see down her stomach was because we tried to clone the animal, but the eggs were non-viable when we retrieved them, and probably would never have been viable anyway. But we never did. I never thought just to take a sample of the blood, because we didn't think of these conditions as having a fingerprint within the blood. And it's so obvious now, right? But it just shows how when you're looking through, I don't know, I don't want to say the wrong end of a telescope, but when you're focused on a viewing device, whether it's a microscope or whatever, you can often miss the thing that's adjacent to you. And with the advent of COVID and what was, the whole idea of viral proteins causing neurological manifestation of disease. What's the mechanism there? And so, yes, we can demonstrate that there's sort of neurotropism, and the viruses can travel up and down nerve fibers and invade into the brain. But it might be something just a little bit more simple than that. And it's as the blood, which is, one of the primary movers and constituents within which the immune system operates, that as the body is attempting to deal with these foreign proteins, it's just in the blood, and it's there that the pathology starts. And so how small does the seed need to be in order to get into the brain to cause a problem? Or can it cross can the protein cross between blood and brain regions, so from the vasculature into the parenchyma, the tissue of the brain? And I'm inclined to think that what we tended to think of as very isolated and very controlled exchange, particularly in inflammatory disease states, breaks down, and these misfolding proteins get into the brain if you're predisposed, I suppose, with genetic instabilities or markers, which Daphne monkey was. She had a single nucleotide deletion in a particular gene that we were able to find. And it may be just that were you not to get the shock and the blood's ability to filter out these aggregates, then it just becomes a vicious circle. And the causal starting mechanism might be the deployment or the exposure of the blood compartment to these viral misfolding proteins, and then this happens. And of course, a monkey, she's subject to all manner of monkey viruses, right? And what I wouldn't give to just be able to get her one nucleotide, one nucleotide deletion. Eminently fixable, you would think, but public informant says, are you saying that you placed the stent? It's not a stent. It's a if we're being specific about what the words we're using, it's you're basically placing in a injection cannula, very fine, sort of 30 gauge injection cannula, with in that 30 gauge cannula, you're still able to get an electrode, so you can guide that. You would have a sort of array, and it would have the recording electrodes around it, and you could sort of independently move those whilst independently moving the injection cannula to get the ticks. And you would just in this instance, so in this instance, where we're targeting nucleus accumbens. So this is literally the placement. Oh shit! It's the placement from one experiment, right? So that's the pre-positioning. I wanted to pause. Stupid thing. Doesn't it pause? Play, pause. Right. Let's just pause. All right. So that is us, and again, it takes weeks to months of effort to get to this point. And, by this time, I've done so many monkeys and so many injections that I can really start to differentiate where, what and where the tick type, how it will emerge. And so one of the things that was interesting. Now, I wasn't the first to show that injections into limbic regions cause vocalization. I was the first to really bring anything approaching this degree of quantification. So what were qualitative assessments, right? So in this instance, we were doing vocal tics, and so I was, I'm credited. There are other people, of course, credited with it, but I'm credited with developing the first primate model of Tourette's syndrome. But it was built on work that was first done in the 80s, where they were taking this GABA antagonist and selectively disinhibiting areas of these subcortical networks. And the idea that you could get vocalization in the primate, you could switch it on and off, is when you understand how the neuroscientist brain thinks, and you understand about how we tend to view subcortical cortical interactions, that if once you're able to start modulating vocalization circuits, you're beginning to get, in a primate, you're getting towards the proto-structure of language, or language processing centers, and how the brain evolves, particularly in humans. Why and how did those areas evolve in the manner that they did? And to be able to switch on and off vocalization in the manner that we did is, I guess if I was young and still really motivated to sort of pick at that particular wound and scab, I would be like, yeah, we should be all in there trying to work it out. And but then I'm sort of, but as a result of these large language models, right, as a manuscript preprint I was reading the other day, right, the most efficient in terms of not training that, but the word bank on which it and terms in which it can draw from, and infer statistical, or do statistical inference on, are made at the programming level to model these networks of the brain, and how we understand how the all these different functional areas of the cortex, how they are coordinated together such that you can do these emergent behaviors, a bit like like a LLM does when you're making an inference. So when you're listening to someone talking and expressing something, you are doing a degree of computation that overlaps with an LLM, because there's a element of you're using short-term memory to hold what the person is saying. There are, of course, it's experiential, so you have to know what the other person is trying to translate. So you need some overlap of experience between the two in order for good lines of communication. And then there's the larger context of what the conversation is happening in, and the architecture of the brain and these cortical subcortical structures is they're tuned, hyper specialized tuning to be able to select for the networks and areas that you need to attend to leverage the statistical inference that you can do. Now, there are subdomains within those regions, right? So you can't just say it's just a if we were looking at canonical areas of research, we would say this is an associative dorsolateral prefrontal cortical phenomenon, and so it's just those areas that are being drawn upon with respect to things like abstraction and intelligence around language. And that's not the case, because there's meaning, and so this is where I think these newer models that have been put forward that are way more energy efficient and way more efficient with respect to the inference database work, I think is that, well, I'm not saying that was what they were doing in the manuscript in this instance, but what the brain is doing is it's using emotional inference as well. So often words have emotional connotations to them, and that's not just a binary bit-like computation that's going on, as the cognitive neuroscientists sort of think about dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. There are all these other limbic associations, and there are also the overlaps around the body, right? So these are often what a lot of the prediction is that the proto language was more tuned for basics, like we need to hunt, we need to fight, we need to fuck, right? Then it's at least a pair-like activity, and often a group-like activity. I'm not sure about the fucking so much, but let's see. Hang on, I've lost the chat, but I see there's questions in there. They're working on a free-floating mRNA spike vaccine now. Yeah, I don't know how different that is from what was there previously. You're of course going to get exosomes studied with spike protein. That's been shown in vaccinated. Quite a few years ago. It's amazing how quickly 6 months turns into a year, then it's 3 years, and then all of a sudden it's 10 years, and your cutting edge work it's just no longer cutting edge anymore. It's just, but yeah, free floating exosomes, I think, have that they're already part of the mechanism. They didn't think of it. Now, are they leveraging it more by putting in packaging instructions? Potentially, but in terms of exosomal studding and releasing, that shit was already out there, I'm afraid, whether they thought it or not. So let's see. So the tick. So it's the drug that's being micro injected into the region. So around that little injection cannula, you can imagine. Can I escape out of that? And then it's updating. So for every microliter of injectate, you could say you have a micro millimeter, so a micron. So what did we used to say? It was 1 microliter was equal to, I don't want to say a millimeter cubed. For so many years since I looked at that. Maybe it was a millimeter cubed. Well, that's grok. That's fucking neuroscience is easy these days. So, what volume would 1 microliter take up in the brain? Millimeter cubed? Maybe it's a millimeter cubed. Let's see. I'm asking GPT-5. Yeah, it's a millimeter cubed. So we would, like, you try to use the minimal activation possible, but for reliable results, you can get activation with 3 microliters of injectate, but if you go to 5 to 7, you're more guaranteed to get an effect in this instance. And there's a degree of barbarity to it, right? You're physically getting into the brain, and again, there's damage, right? We know this. It's a one-way journey for the monkey here. There's no recovery to those procedures, right? But you work that system till the results start to become unpredictable. And usually I would find, if you were doing like these subcortical regions, if you could get past 10 effective, like good reproducible injections, then the system starts breaking down and it becomes difficult to record neurons, and the response to the injectate becomes unpredictable. Why? Because you're continuing to put probes into the brain and damage the area. So those are factors. It's not a benign process. And to ow, it's still fucking thing. Yeah, whilst it's saving, and I'm going to take a wee break. Let me do that. I'll just do the intro. I'll be back in a second. So let's see. What was the difference between Neuralink and the Tom Oxley stent? So with the stent electrodes, basically what it is what it says on the tin, which is that you're basically taking the stent up into the blood vessel, and then it's got a series of contacts on them, and it's looking to listen to neurons that are close to the larger vessels. The Neuralink is just going into cortex, and I'm old school, and I'm generally of the opinion that if you want to get the primal effects from being able to modulate those networks, you have to hit as many nodes in that network as possible. Trying to change a complex system by just twisting the potentiometer at one part of a circuit isn't going to get you the results that you want. And the stent electrodes, it's a complex way to put electrodes into the brain. I think, but then I'll crack open the skull and just going through the top. And so you can say that the stent is less invasive, I suppose, and that it hasn't breached the brain parenchyma, and it's listening from the vasculature, the brain vasculature. But the simple fact is that it's going to lack a degree of spatial specificity, where you have micron level steps, should you need to take them, with the approaches that I would use to position yourself around a brain that's, the brain moves a lot when you're alive, and that's always a feature of neuronal recordings. But let's see. What software do you use to produce the images of the brain like that? So those are, they're literally DICOM images, right? So it's a standard format of medical imaging, but it depends on the device that you're using. So in this instance, what you're looking at on the screen, what this shows is a mix of CT and MRI imaging, and then it's merged together. And it used to be a whole bunch of MATLAB programming to do that before. Again, these things have suddenly, like, the bar to being able to do them has dropped precipitously with, again, the large language models and what they've been able to sort of bring to the game. Let's see. Did I have anything else that I wanted to bring up today? No, that's it. Just I wish we had Daphne's blood, but potentially we have humanoid version Daphne coming across my desk this week. Stay tuned for that, and we'll see. We'll see if our premises hold, our predictions hold, and I don't like tempting fate, but yeah, I'm going to be of the opinion if it is spike related, this emergent multi-system atrophy that we're about to look at, we'll be able to find the blood markers for it, and that now gives us a window for treatment that wasn't there before. Now, again, do we look at multi-system atrophy in a new light by looking at the blood in this instance? Maybe, but yeah, it's actually way later than I thought, and it's getting it's it's getting dark now. I can't see out the back window. I can't tell whether it's getting light or dark anymore, and it is getting dark, and it's my Sunday. So I'm going to call it quits. I'm not logged in on anything 'cause I logged out. But if you like the stream and you want to support science for the public, by the public, please go to McCairndojo.com, hit that blue button, and don't give your money to YouTube, although I'm not monetized on YouTube yet. And yes, we're pushing on. There's lots happening, and I will do my very best to stream as much as I can, and then we'll see where we are in a month or two. We can't tell these days. Things are changing so rapidly. So I'm gonna. Are the stem cells to be intravenously infused? Yes. And the treatment in this instance, there is not the financial barrier that is there with stem cells proper, which I think are a rip-off relative to the growth factors. We can concentrate the growth factors and standardize the growth factor amount delivery, and the cost is way lower than receiving a dose of stem cells. The thing that's stopping you from getting treatment right now is probably the reluctance to get on a plane. If you can get on a plane and fly to Japan, you can get into the clinic and get treated, and yeah, you have to pay for the treatment there, but it's for the cost of one stem cell treatment, you can have many growth factor treatments. But then we have to include the cost for the apheresis as well. But yeah, we're taking in patients right now. If you know someone that's in trouble, point them this way. And just the non-streaming side, the serious side. If you can send just a simple blood sample. I'll just put it in the chat. synapticlabs.com, and if you send me a simple spot of blood on the slide like this one, and this one again was a result of I didn't get the injection, COVID was minimal, but there's all manner of footprints in here that are concerning, and I hope with the upgrades, the lab upgrades, that we can really refine down the diagnostics in this instance. And we want to be, you shouldn't be it shouldn't be abused to say you have to have these treatments. I'm very conscious of that, and I want to be. I really want to work towards, like, okay, this is the threshold where you should probably think about going and getting the treatment as it stands at the moment, which is the apheresis plus the multiple treatments of stem cell growth factors. And we're fine-tuning how to look at that protocol right now, but we can probably deploy maybe at least 5 to 6 boluses of stem cell growth factors in a sort of 2-week period, because I think that's the sort of minimum that you need to think about with respect to if you're making the effort to come for therapy, then 2 weeks. 2 weeks, it's outpatient type treatments. So you go in, you'll get infusions and the apheresis, so a couple of hours, out of your day. Do I recommend the bar hopping scene? going going bananas in Roppongi and Shinjuku whilst you're doing these therapies? No, I don't. You should probably use the time, the 2 weeks, as a chance to view the more serene side of Japan, visit the temples, that sort of thing. Okay, and then after 2 weeks, and like you regain your bearings, and you're sort of back in the flow of things, then maybe you could think about going out on a Friday night, maybe. But right now, we should all be very, very thankful for. Well, he's my prize monkey right now. Just for, would vials of whole blood or centrifuged blood be of more use than slides? Actually, if you could centrifuge and dry the plasma on the slide, that's a good secondary marker that I would like. Because there's still this, like, the reason I'm doing whole blood is that, one, it lowers the threshold for people to be able to test. And so far, the difference between whole blood and plasma is it tracks well, and that's independently across myself and Jordan Vaughan. And I know that just because of patients that have come across my desk versus going across his. And but I would, if you can get both for a patient, that's way better. The more data points I have, the more the more there is to work with. And I don't know, I mean, if you can do medical transport of whole blood, then yeah, that's worth doing. But then we have to think of how to set up things this end, because sending slides is, I've had a couple get hung up in customs, and they're still there. I'm trying to fight to get them across, because there's just not a good framework for a microscope slide, right? So, but it does get through. So, yeah. So if you can get a separation of your plasma before sending and put it on good slides, great. That helps me help you to decide whether you should be purchasing that plane ticket and laying out the money for treatments in this instance. And what do I? It's tough for me to say, like, what you should be budgeting for the treatment. But if you go for stem cells, you can be looking at $20,000-$30,000 per treatment, and I think probably 10 to 15,000 for multiple treatments over 2 weeks and multiple protocols is eminently achievable in the current environment. I need to talk more with Edogawa, because there's still the calculation of sort of costs and that end. But the blood test, to send me a blood test and a glass slide, that's $150, right? That should be, and the cost of the materials and postage. And you can find out if you've got an amyloid burden that too many people who I like are coming to me and saying, "Oh, I should be okay. You can have my blood as a control." It ain't a control, I'm afraid. All right, I'm out of here, and I can send you vials you want in the EDTA tubes, or I say that honestly, Karma, if you could just get the spots on the slides. I really think that. Someone wants me to click the link. All right, it better be fucking funny. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, wonky blood-brain barrier. Okay. Yeah, it's blood vasculature, and you want to fix the blood vasculature? Fix the blood. Yeah, and a hard equation. I'm afraid. All right, I'm out of here, and I've managed to find the outro that I wanted the other day, and I'm feeling more upbeat as of late, just because of results starting to come in. So, yeah, if you know people who, and I think there's many people out there who should be seriously considering treatment options right now before you're turning up with multi-system atrophy. Get the amyloids before the amyloids get you. All right, I'm out of here. Take care. God bless. And,
bro, you don't know how angry I am. You do, like, I was just leaving for fucking work. You do not understand how fucking pissed off. After reading that little line, I will be arrested for not taking a fucking vaccine. Fuck these cappers! I will fucking kill each fucking capper, I swear! This is not a fucking joke anymore. This is fucking dead serious. I am fucking dead serious. These people don't know who the fuck they're actually playing with. Fuck these cappers. No fucking vaccine or mRNA will ever flow through my fucking blood. Never! I will fucking die! Fucking fighting for my fucking beliefs and my fucking forefathers and my fucking lineage! Fuck these motherfuckers!
All that
I like this guy.
Send check 45,000 term debt.
Never!
Matrix root. Boom.
Never! Scaffers!